Hello everyone. Once again, I am doing a video where I think my standard Clown Decade introduction does not do justice to the absolute embarrassing, humiliating, in fact, situation that we find ourselves in the United Kingdom. On screen right now you can see videos of a clip posted out in the open on Twitter by a group called Palestine Action, who I have covered in the past, and who, with their past action, I am shocked are not a prescribed terrorist group. For those listening, a couple of men have broken into what looks like an RAF base and start spraying paint into jet engines of military aircraft and speed off on electric scooters away from the scene of the crime. The accompanying tweet, again that they just post out in the open, they are happy to let it be known they are criminals, says breaking, Palestine Action break into RAF Brize Norton, a damage 2 military aircraft. Flights depart daily from the base to RAF at Cero in Cyprus, and from Cyprus, British planes collect intelligence, refuel fighter jets, and transport weapons to commit genocide in Gaza. Believe it or not, the group called Palestine Action are not too fond of the way the Israelis have been handling the situation over the past 2 years, despite the fact that they suffered a 9/11 equivalent event at the hands of Hamas, who obviously were in charge of Gaza. Everyone's question has effectively been, why weren't these people shot? How is security so lax that two hoodlums on electric scooters can simply just waltz into the base, cause millions of pounds of damage, and just ride straight out again? And lastly, how have the police, or the authorities, not actually prescribed Palestine Action, given that they have a history of, well, plenty of criminal damage that easily gets into the millions? The answer, largely human rights laws, but also national hero Charlie Peters, journalist for GB News, posted a little comment to Twitter about why this could have happened. This is embarrassing but not surprising. When I was at Brize Norton for VE Day last month, the escort disappeared and a load of reporters could drive around the base without any oversight. There was no security checks on us or our cars before we accessed the RAF's largest station. In other words, we have a Prime Minister telling us that we need to get on a war footing and basically signalling that, well, the Army, the Air Force and the Navy could be directly involved in certain conflicts in the near future, and we're in a state where this military hardware is just effectively for sabotaging. It's almost like this is intentional. This is how bad this is. And once again, I find it very difficult to just blame Labour for this. This isn't something that can particularly happen just over the course of less than a year in Parliament. This happens after a decade of decline. Because I've kind of realised over the past year, I've been incredibly critical of Labour for very good reason, but I still always try and give some benefit of the doubt to the Tories. And I did for some time, partly because I was a member. But I've just come to the realisation that, no, you cannot trust Tories again. We end up in situations like this over a long period of time, and the Tories were in power for a long period of time. And I'm getting fed up of blaming the judiciary and civil service and other public sector factions. Yes, Blair gave them a lot of power. You were in Parliament, and via Parliaments they were given power, and via Parliaments they should be able to take the power away. And yet they didn't. And why didn't they? Because at the end of the day they agreed with what Blair was doing. Because they are happy with the situation this is in. They barely have to do any work. They become celebrities. They basically become rich off not being able to do anything and being able to pass the buck to the people that have absolutely no oversight over what they're doing. And it ends up with a couple of people being able to cause millions of pounds of damage to military assets with no consequence, really. Okay, some of the people in the past who have done things like this, yeah, they end up in jail, sure. But even jail's relatively comfortable these days, let's be real. It's not exactly uncomfortable living. Again, largely due to human rights laws. So anyway, more details from the Times. Palestine Action sprayed red paint into the engine of two Airbus Voyager aircraft after breaking into the apparently it was secured, airbase in Oxfordshire last night. Video from the activist group showed two people on electric scooters rushing across the runway of the base. The group said that they used repurposed fire extinguishers to spray paint at the engines and use crowbars to cause further damage. Matthew Saville, Director of Military Science at the Royal United Services Institute, said it was embarrassing, really, adding, in a war, sabotage will be a risk and bases like Brize Norton represent critical points in our system. Well, I wouldn't be announcing that on national newspapers, but okay. I guess these activists already knew anyway. The MOD, well known for trying to cover up embarrassing things like this, said, "We strongly condemn this vandalism," okay, why didn't you shoot them, "of RAF assets. We are working closely with the police who are investigating." Why do you need the police involved in this? Just find them and execute them, frankly. I'm not even joking. We are in one of the most unstable times globally that I have ever lived through. We have a Prime Minister saying that we need to get on a war footing. How about we act like it and say, if you destroy or damage RAF assets, army assets, any sort of military equipment that is vital to this war footing we're apparently on, then we don't care, you are getting the capital punishment as would be normal in any time when you are on the war footing. Let's just be realistic here, this doesn't deserve just jail time. This is the sort of thing where if you were in any sort of state of war in the past, I would expect a gallows to be erected. And I'm not even joking about that. There's a reason that capital punishment keeps being brought back into the public debating sphere, and it's because people are fed up of criminals getting away with things, and now they are attacking our military infrastructure directly on military sites. Also, anyone involved with security at the base at that time, sack them immediately. There can be zero tolerance for this. Our armed forces represent the very best of Britain. Well, they can't even defend their highest priority RAF base. They put their lives on the line for us, and they display duty, dedication, and selfless personal sacrifice, and are an inspiration to us all. It's our responsibility to support those who defend us. Is that all you can say, MOD? No demanding for justice? No advocation for, at the very least, very long jail times for these criminals? Nothing like that? Just, oh, by the way, don't blame our armed forces. No, I'm afraid I'm going to. Security has been very lax, and even Charlie Peters was saying that this is not an unusual thing. Palestine Action said, despite publicly condemning the Israeli government, Britain continues to send military cargo, fly spy planes over Gaza, and refuel US-Israeli fighter jets. Well, yeah, they're our allies. Britain isn't just complicit, it's an active participant in the Gaza genocide and war crimes in the Middle East, blah blah blah. By decommissioning 2 military planes, Palestine Action have directly intervened to break the chains of oppression. Well, you would think that, but there is more breaking news as I cover this. According to Guido Fawkes, unfortunately for the protesters, the 2 planes they targeted are only involved in counter-Daesh operations in Iraq and Syria. In other words, they are for fighting ISIS. Which, to be absolutely fair, I wouldn't be shocked if these Palestine Action protesters are actually pro-ISIS because they're so NPC, anti-Western, anti-Jew, anti-Israeli, whatever. I don't think they really care for the details. They certainly didn't care for the details enough to check which planes they were supposed to be targeting. And so I don't think they care for the details of the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in. Anyway, Guido are also pointing out that the Labour Defence Ministers have not reported the massive breach in Parliament. Instead, it's just to be released to the media, as is kind of the case for every embarrassing piece of failure this government is overseeing. Again, though, if this was reported to Parliament, Tories would be blaming Labour for this, despite the fact that all of these measures of decline are just as much their fault as Labour's. We have had 2 completely useless parties for 2 decades now. It's no wonder we're in decline. Anyway, one thing that has not helped all this is people found the Royal Air Force tweeting 4 years ago now, to be fair, but still it's funny. A couple of, well, humiliating looking pictures of RAF officials riding electric scooters, given that obviously this was just an attack that was committed with electric scooters, celebrating that as part of World EV Day, because bear in mind we are still in the woke era of the planet, the RAF is looking at innovative solutions to work toward a greener future. One innovation option is the provision of electric scooters at RAF Marham to allow staff to quickly and efficiently travel around the huge station. Well, clearly the proof of concept works because you're attacked with them. Anyway, to show you how pathologically useless the system is, or possibly even working as intended, let's bear in mind we have a judiciary that is directly attacking the armed forces pretty much every day. You have a judiciary that is doing absolutely nothing about Palestine Action, so for the next 20 minutes we're going through parts of their website to show you just how stupid or malicious the judiciary is for doing absolutely nothing about this terrorist group. On their homepage, they're pretty obvious what they're about. Shut down Israel's arms trade in Britain. That by itself, I am fine with you protesting. When it comes to the things that this group do, though, yeah, pretty much everyone involved deserves jail time. This is still on the homepage, by the way, but their 3 main advertisements are join a direct action training day. If you can't make a training day, just do an online crash course instead. And if you want to help but not be directly involved in the action, just help fund the movement. All out in the open. As I say, I've been through a few of their direct action events before, and basically it's just breaking into either manufacturing sites that make military equipment, or obviously, as we've seen today, breaking into literal RAF bases and causing millions of pounds worth of criminal damage. But criminal damage for whatever the judiciary want is effectively legal. Just look at the Colston statue. That was the canary in the coal mine for things like this. It's okay to tear down statues if it's a statue of someone we deem racist. It's okay to attack military installations if they are being used in racist wars. It's as simple as that. We have a judiciary that hate us. You want even more proof? Here is the guy that started off the whole Chagos deal that even now is causing more issues, because if we're going to do anything against Iran, Mauritius needs to know first, and guess what? They're an ally of China, who is an ally of Iran. It was the craziest deal known to man, and it's all because of this guy who is happy to boast about what he did.
We were talking earlier in the student event about the fact that you've taken on a lot of cases against the UK, your home country, and that's completely acceptable.
Yeah, it's a really fantastic thing about Britain, that I think it's probably the only country in the world where, when you've been to an international court against your own country, won and humiliated them completely, they still celebrate you.
This and hundreds, possibly even thousands of people like him dominate the top echelons of our judiciary, of our legal system. People who hold you to such contempt they want to humiliate you, your countrymen, and your own government that you vote for. Shoot the activists on sight if they break into RAF bases, obviously, and get anyone involved put in prison as soon as possible, but this guy as well needs to be stripped of absolutely every honour he has, humiliated throughout the street, put into stocks for all I care. He wants to humiliate us. Well, I say his punishment should be to be humiliated right back. Anyway, I'm definitely laying on thick just how obviously Palestine Action should be treated as a terrorist organisation. For their direct action training days, they say that they can stop the Israeli war machine operating in Britain as a result of direct action. And they even have an entire strategy. And to them, direct action means targeting the source of the problem and intervening ourselves. It means rather than appeal to institutions, politicians, or any others to create the necessary changes, we create the change using our own power. And this is the funny thing, they have institutions and politicians on their side. The two activists who damaged the planes, they're obviously going to be punished because the system effectively needs to show that, oh, if something bad happens, of course we'll do something about it, but they won't do anything about the wider problem here, which is the big issue, because for those two, it's like a Hydra. There will be 4 more waiting to cause equal damage. Have we seen that? Yes, of course we have. Manufacturing sites for military equipment have been damaged by Palestine Action, and what happened? Well, those people got thrown in jail for a bit, and, well, as I say, the Hydra. There's plenty more waiting in the wings to cause even further damage. Direct action also means imagining the future we want and bringing it to the present. For example, if we want to see Elbit shut down, we shut Elbit down. Some may confuse direct action with civil disobedience. They're basically the same thing. Civil disobedience is a subsect of direct action. Direct action means anything from literal terrorism and killing hundreds of people to blocking a highway, just like Just Stop Oil did. And as far as I'm concerned, all of it should be pretty much considered terrorism. However, in order to understand our strategy, it's important to note the difference. Civil disobedience often involves breaking the law in order to force a government or institution to create policy changes, and Just Stop Oil won with their net zero victories. Though to be fair, that's having to be pushed back on now even by Ed Miliband, because reality does not care about your protests. Direct action, which we employ, bypasses our complicit government and forces the necessary change ourselves. It doesn't involve appealing to those who perpetrate Palestinian oppression. Okay. In fact, do I have the clip of John McDonnell who lets the mask slip? I think I do.
Democracy is about taking control of your own community, and that means industrial action, confinement, direct action. We used to call it insurrection. Now we're polite and say it's direct action.
Yeah, that is the man who could have become the Chancellor of Exchequer under Jeremy Corbyn effectively saying, and in the compilation there's way more crazy stuff that he says, but just admitting that all direct action means is insurrection, which in turn means overthrowing the government as we know it. Which, look, I do not like this Labour government, however, I would never advocate for that, even if the system is at breaking point like we see now. Because ultimately, I'm quite Enoch Powell on this whole thing, in that when people tell me things are impossible, well, I believe that the will of the British allows for basically anything to be possible. You know, this little island didn't make the world's greatest empire by accepting things are impossible and things should stay as they are. And I still believe that now. Anyway, I'm not reading all of their principles. I am just interested in this dilemma, because the rest of it's pretty obvious. Attack targets and cause damage. But they have this point called dilemma. Causing a dilemma to our targets is a key part of a successful direct action campaign. This looks slightly different for primary and secondary targets. So, I'm not being funny, but this is a rather large project. So for primary targets, to win, we need to make the loss we cause our primary target greater than the benefit of our remaining open. That didn't make any sense to me. Oh, I think I see what they're saying. Basically, they need to cause enough damage that they can't recover from it. Whilst Elbit is likely to sustain some losses in order to avoid the political shame of having to shut down another factory because of Palestine action, they still operate their factories as businesses. Sustained disruption must cause a loss great enough where they have to consider whether they stay open to avoid the embarrassment or shut down to save themselves from making bigger losses. The thing is, that should be incredibly embarrassing for the government. We have a government that cannot help protect a factory and cannot keep a business running because they're effectively permitting these hooligans to cause millions of pounds of damage within their factories. For example, Elbit's Tamworth factory was forced to sell to another company which stopped using the site to manufacture parts for Israeli tanks and now only makes parts for public transport. They had to sell it as their profit margin dropped down to 75%. That's still a massive margin, actually, due to constant disruption lowering their revenue and a huge increase in security which increased their costs. Our campaign is successful when we tip the balance in our favour. How economically illiterate do you have to be to think that a 75% profit margin's, like, bad? Like, you know, I'm thinking of supermarkets, obviously, where they have pretty much a 2% margin. And obviously, when it comes to arms companies, I guess the profit margins are expected to be much more massive. I would argue there's a lot more going on there for that profit margin not to make sense. I would actually posit it to you that they just move the site, move the factory to somewhere that's a bit more secretive, so you can't locate it. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if that's what happened at all. Secondary targets. For secondary targets, sustained disruption forces them to addressing questions for the benefit of their company or institution. For example, if a contracted firm works with Elbit and experiences constant disruption leading to losses for their company, they must decide if the value they gain from working with Elbit is greater than the losses Palestine action is causing. Once again, just economically damage them with illegal disruption. I call it that. Vandalism. In fact, even worse, property destruction. Again, this is all a subsect of terrorism. They're using violence for their political ends. Okay, they're not killing people. Doesn't really matter. Property, at the end of the day, is just an extension of a person. For secondary targets, their whole business is unlikely to be based on one contract, and it would make financial sense not to work with Elbit. Not only is this dilemma posed to secondary targets, but any potential company who may be approached or seek working with Elbit must consider the risks of Palestine action. I don't know why they're focusing on Elbit so much. I think it's because they had some success with Elbit and so they're just using it as the example. But yeah, they're pretty blatant here. Cause as much damage as possible, that is one of their main aims and the point of their training days. And again, this is all out in the open. Literally, there are 5 direct action training days that are being advertised on the website. It's literally a click away from the homepage throughout plenty of different areas of the UK. Newcastle, Leicester, London, Liverpool, Glasgow, all going on throughout the summer, pretty much going on once a week. Literally, you can just sign up to these things. Obviously, they don't tell you where they are holding them. They only tell you that the day before or 10 hours before, whatever, and then you can get in. I'm just saying, if people like Hope Not Hate can easily infiltrate Dork Right events and things like that, it should be pretty easy for the, Secret Service in the UK to infiltrate all of these training days and arrest absolutely everyone. In fact, they managed to do it for a Quaker meeting house and everyone thought, oh, what about free speech? Well, I don't particularly have any sympathy for them because, while to be fair to them, they weren't part of Palestine Action. They were under the same umbrella of these groups and part of Youth Demand, who, while they don't attack military facilities and production facilities, they still do pretty much do the Just Stop Oil thing of trying to block highways and things like that. As far as I'm concerned, they should be pretty much treated the same. And if you can't make it to one of these direct action training days, instead you can take a crash course online. And again, these happen pretty much every week. And also there's even a bigger network than just this. You can also join the Arrestee Support Volunteer Workshop, which tells you what you can do to protest these criminals at the courts and what else you can do to help out with morale and things like that, or possibly even fundraise. It's a whole network. I'd be shocked if the Secret Service isn't actually infiltrated this group at the moment, but it is beyond me how it is not designated a terrorist group at the moment. But what do you expect from a broken country? Anyway, getting away from how you can help, they also gloat about some of the victories they've had, which obviously include plenty of site shutdowns. Elbit shut down their factory permanently in Tamworth. Israeli arms firms HQ in London abandoned after Palestine Action campaign. And also in Oldham, the Elbit forced to sell Ferranti after sustained direct action campaign. And as you can see from the dates, this is stuff that happened 3 years ago, or the Tamworth one was last year. And they're only going to get emboldened by this because ultimately what's the punishment? A few years in jail. That's a badge of honour to these people. If you are breaking into sites that are producing military hardware, as far as I'm concerned, that is a shoot-on-sight policy for things like that. Why in military research facilities, production facilities, factories, even military bases, are these people frankly not being shot and literally risking death? This is how low risk it is. None of these people think they're going to die. They just think they're going to have a few years in prison. What does that tell you about the deterrent? That they actually see that as a positive. Look at what I did for the cause. I sacrificed a few years of my life. It's nothing compared to actually having to sacrifice and risk your life, is it? Clearly, though, they really do have a massive vendetta against Elbit because they have an entire page on why they target them. In fact, it's not just a page, it's an entire section of the website. Literally, actually, I'm going to show you this first. Look at the top here. Palestine Action, about's the first thing. Then you've got Elbit, and then you can join. That's how much they hate Elbit. It's the only company there that they actually seem to have an entire section on, despite the fact that obviously there's an awful lot of companies that are supporting Israel in this war by selling them arms. In fact, I even noticed while getting the screenshot there, they have a store as well, which obviously has some logo t-shirts and what have you, but also just plenty of commie LARPing propaganda. I say LARPing, to be absolutely fair to them, they did manage to actually successfully accomplish a genuine sabotage mission on British soil. I say LARPing, but this is the thing. This isn't LARPing, this is actually happening, and why I want them prescribed as a terrorist group, and I want everyone involved in jail. Never to be let out, frankly. Because you cannot trust people like this who attack your own military bases. They are obviously people who need to be punished and never let out in society again. Anyway, back to Elbit. Elbit Systems is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, profiting from and enabling the Zionists' military regime, occupation, apartheid, and genocide of Palestine. Again, anyone who says that Israel in any way is apartheid has no idea what's the actual makeup and the way Israel actually works. It was always very funny to hear ethno-nationalists say, I want a state like Israel, because ironically, Israel's more diverse than Britain even is now. It's 70% Israeli Jew or something like that, and most of the rest of the minority are Palestinian ethnics. It's actually quite funny, but really nobody knows how Israel actually works, and that has been made incredibly obvious by, well, people like Hassan Piker. But anyway, that's a different subject. Elbit supplies the Israeli military with 85% of their drones and land-based equipment, as well as electronic warfare systems, munitions and more. The company's surveillance equipment is prevalent across Palestine and is used against the Palestinians through drone operations, at checkpoints and across Israel's apartheid wall. Which again, it's never really pointed out that Egypt don't want the Palestinians in Egypt either. Elbit supplies the Israeli military with all of its small caliber munitions through subsidiary IMI Systems, while its armed remote control boats have attacked Palestinian fishermen. The Hermes drones are both used for surveillance and can be equipped with missiles. You get the idea here. they have a lot of information about what Elbit actually manufactures, and obviously, given it's an Israeli company, a lot of it gets sent to Israel for a war that they are currently in. Going on to say that the Elbit quadcopter drones are used to massacre the population of Gaza in this genocide, which I'm so fed up of hearing. Apparently, acclaimed British surgeon Dr. Nazam Mahmood recalled how these drones are used in Gaza. It's not an occasional thing, this was day after day after day. Well, they are in a war. Operating on children who would say I was lying on the ground after a bomb had dropped and this quadcopter came down, hovered over me and shot me. Interesting that this child survived then, but okay. And Elbit's business model relies on the destruction of Palestine and the genocide of its population. Well, I guess the refutation to that is they weren't at a war before 2023 and were still profitable. Defence companies still make money even in peacetime because generally the army is still training, doing war games and using live fire ammunition that they still need and requisition off these companies. So, okay, they will definitely make more money during this war, but it's not exactly like they're unprofitable outside of it. They even go on to say the same technologies outfitting Israel's apartheid war run along the US border war with Mexico and are used for monitoring of indigenous lands. Elbit's drones have been purchased in major volumes by India, in turn deploying them in violent military campaigns perpetuating the repression of the Kashmiri populations. My goodness. This company making military equipment is apparently entirely responsible for some of the war crimes that are committed with them. It's just incredible, isn't it? It's never really a question that's been answered, but okay, you get rid of all Western arms manufacturers. What do you do when Iran then make a nuclear bomb? Because, you know, there's a reason it's called an arms race. If you stop your own race in your tracks, your enemy win the arms race. What are you going to do then? Do you think that they're going to be happy with you that you have done all this? No, they think completely differently to you. They have a very, very ethnically centred mind. They're not particularly going to treat you like first-class citizens for helping them in their struggle. For a lot of these people, you are going to have to convert to Islam if you are going to be accepted by them at all. And personally, I don't think a lot of you are going to particularly like that. Anyway, last thing to touch upon, they released their own news articles, and most of it is just updates on the type of direct action they've been committing, along with reporting things like international legal organisations condemning the use of counter-terror laws against the Filtered 18, who obviously were part of Palestine Action. In other words, they are clearly showing that they have an awful lot of institutions on their side, but they are going to pretend to be against the whole system. And this obviously is why the system is not doing anything against them, because it is tacitly for them. Realistically, the whole system's in a kind of civil war at the moment. They have been really ever since Brexit. Well, they have been for a long time, really. But it's all becoming a lot more public the more global instability we see, because effectively what it is a civil war between internationalists and nationalists. And effectively in Great Britain we have had either active internationalists, Tony Blair, in charge, or we've had tacit internationalists in charge who try and give the red meat out to the nationalists every chance they get. There is a reason that Reform are doing so well at the moment, because they are quite comfortably in the nationalist section of this civil war. So yes, it is quite obvious what needs to happen as a result of this, frankly, humiliating event that happened either in the early hours of this morning or yesterday evening. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. Two random guys broke into an RAF base and did millions of pounds worth of damage. And it wasn't even against planes that they were supposed to be targeting. I will not accept anything less than the following from any sort of government. And obviously I'm going to be disappointed here, but this would be my demand from this. Whoever was on the security team of the night and whoever oversees security at that RAF base, fire them immediately. Do not let them back in any public role ever again. Take away their pension. You need to bring the hammer down hard if you are willing to say we are on a war footing as a country, and yet our own military infrastructure can literally just be taken out by a couple of guys with a couple of fire extinguishers and some e-scooters. 2. Obviously prescribe Palestine Action. Anyone who's ever been a part of the group or any part of their protest, immediately under investigation, immediately on a watch list. Anyone, obviously, that has committed a crime in the name of them gets punished to the highest level of the law. Nothing less. And 3, the two guys who went in on e-scooters, they have to be made examples of. Make it the most public case you can and give them life in prison, assuming that's within our sentencing guidelines. And guess what? If it's not, I am going to demand that you make it so. This is beyond intolerable. This is humiliating for the United Kingdom. Any enemy state sees this, they obviously have seen it because I've seen it, they have now just been given a big signal. Bases in the UK, they are ripe for sabotage operations, because you're also going to need to do a massive PR campaign to effectively try and let everyone know that security is being ramped up at these places. No more of these tweets about e-scooters, no more of these tweets about pride from public sector. No, we're on a war footing, apparently. Can you at least act like it and not make it look like the obvious virtue signal that it is? Right, I think with that, that is everything I had for you for today. I just wanted today to be a quick, Politics Joe React video. Something to pump the blood pressure down. But this week has been absolutely horrific. Grooming gang stuff comes out. Massive U-turn on the inquiry. Turns out the inquiry is going to have some cover-ups as well, at least if Dominic Cummings is to be believed. Abortion's being voted on. Assisted dying's also being voted on. That's going through. This is basically becoming the parliament that is not allowing you to kill your enemies, but is allowing you to kill your own countrymen, whether they are born, unborn, or getting to a point in life they just don't want to keep fighting. It's absurd. I saw a tweet the other day saying that typically in the past we tended to name parliaments if they did something quite major and famous. Well, do you know what this parliament's known for? Being completely incompetent and killing its own people. So I'm with the tweet I saw. I really can't remember who tweeted it, and I want to give them credit, but I think we should start calling this the killing parliament. Because if this decriminalisation of abortions up till birth, and even while the baby is coming out of the birth canal, goes through, where it makes it completely legal to kill a baby up until birth, or it doesn't make it legal, it's just decriminalising it, that means the same thing. And also they are willing to put people to death who are obviously going to be talked into it, as Canada is a perfect example of, then yeah, I think it's a fair name to call it the killing parliament. Which, if that's what we're going to know Keir Starmer and the rest of this cabinet for, totally fine with me. They need to be completely destroyed along with the Tory party as it stands, because you don't get to this point where you can be humiliated like this with such a lax insecurity in your RAF bases without it being a decades-long spiral in decline. It doesn't happen. Tories are as much to blame as Labour for this one. I am fed up of seeing people loving all over Jenrick because he finally got the idea when it's too late. He is still happy to stand with these people. He is still happy to have meetings with people like David Cameron, who was happy to go along in this decline. No, he is not a man to be trusted. The only way I can see myself trusting people basically is if they leave the Uniparty and either join some sort of third party or obviously Reform. Doesn't have to be Reform, I just do not trust them if they are in the major parties. And if the future is simply a case of Reform versus one of these other strange third parties, or even the Lib Dems, I will be happy. I am completely on the Peter Hitchens train. The Uniparty needs to be destroyed. I think what has happened over the past 10 years or so is unforgivable. Okay, you had a massive financial crash, you had COVID. Choices that were made were obviously going to end badly, and Tories still made them. They wanted to emulate Blair. There's no forgiveness for that as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of the people involved in it are probably going to be on hefty pensions for the rest of their life unless something major happens. But I don't think I want to risk what that major happening is. So let's do this the proper way through the proper channels, and let's get Reform in power. They just won a by-election last night where they got nearly 65% of the vote. There is one last chance, as far as I can see, to save this country via proper means. I think we should go down it, because I don't even want to start thinking about what happens if we fail. Right, I think with that, that is everything I had for you for today. Sorry to blackpill you on a Friday, but it has been a hell of a week. I'll try and be more white pill next week, but given how absolutely horrendous everything seems to be going, I don't make any promises. Right. Tosh News next Tuesday, Some Nautica next Thursday, Laughing at the Guardian next Saturday, videos out and as I can make them. If you enjoy my channel, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. That really helps me out with the algorithm, and please, of course, as well, do become a member, do leave super chats and super thanks. They are great ways to help out the channel. Right. With all of that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.